Hey, Sunny, how are you?
We're so excited to have you here today. Welcome. Hi, everyone. My name is Sunny Kim. I am the program manager for UCSB's Professional and Continuing Education Department. I manage our Applied Behavior Analysis program. And today we are so lucky to have the most amazing mom, Melissa, and the most amazing adolescent, Arturo Solares here. But reflecting back on going to these classes, since you are more mature, you're older, do you think they were helpful in any way? Or do you think it was a waste of time?
And there's no wrong answer. You're not getting it. So feel free.
Well, I think it was a bit I mean, some of it might have been helpful, but like mostly, I haven't taken much from those classes, so I think the majority of them weren't like anything super special, I guess.
Can you tell us like what you walked away with from some of these classes?
I walked away with the same thing I walked into them with.
What is that?
Like my personal opinions, I guess. I don't know. Like
Okay,
what
fair enough. So, I mean, what do you do when you get very frustrated? If you're frustrated or you're angry, how do you handle that situation?
Well, like I try to think of like a motivation to like get through something, I guess. Or like, whatever I'm frustrated with.
Fantastic. I love that answer. So you think of like, okay, if I get through this, then I can do this other thing that's super fun.
Yeah.
That what helps you get through it?
Yep.
And
Awesome.
just to add to that, I think, there's a big, I think anything that I tried to sign him up for that was an actual class, like we're going to go sit and we're going to learn how to control our emotions, or we're going to learn to do this. I think anything like that where he was pulled out and it was like, okay, you're gonna learn this task or this skill. I think he never liked that because it always felt like he was different, or it was separate, or it was different. The things that really worked the best and where he was happy and where I felt like he made the most progress where were the situations where it was just full integration and he was there with the other kids, and it was global. It was a global thing. I think he was the happiest in those situations. I think he got the most from it, and he didn't feel like he was like, we're going to learn to count to 10 and take 4 deep breaths. So those other classes almost like backfired because he like resented it having to take them.
Arturo, do you remember when you were younger coming to the toy center at UC Santa Barbara?
Not really, no.
Oh,
No.
really?
Not really.
So I guess we were very boring or we were super effective. Or do you remember going to the summer camp at UC Santa Barbara?
Yeah, I do remember some of that.
Okay, and if I know it was long ago, what was your experience going to the summer camps?
I mean, it was just sort of a place where they like kind of hung out, and they had activities for
It
like
was a
seven
summer camp.
hours, and then I went home.
Did you ever feel like going to that summer camp was like therapy, or did you ever feel like you were getting special help when you attended those summer camps?
Not really, no. I mean, it was more like we're just gonna do these activities as a group. Like, I go with my group and I do like they'll go to a rock wall or do gymnastics or whatever.
Awesome. And I remember I think you were like 5 or 6 years old and you did the really tall rock wall. And I was shocked that, this little kid would be able to climb up this really, really tall. And I think all the employees there were shocked that you were able to climb it up super fast.
Yeah, you scaled it. Yeah.
Yep,
So
very fast. Okay, so anything else you recall about getting extra help or therapy growing up that you want to share?
Not that I can think of.
Not that you can think of.
I don't
So,
know anything about the like when like in school settings when they would try to help you,
Um, like
or no, you don't have to.
So what are you asking?
Like, do you want to talk about any of the things that they did in schools? Like, we were sort of talking globally, but to focus in on school and education.
Well, I mean, in the one school I went to, like they sort of like made it like this whole big deal that like if I ever got into trouble, like they'd say like any other kid would have this, but get like suspended for this or something. But since it's you, like we're just gonna talk to your mom or something.
And
And
but they would do that in front of
Like
everybody, in front of all of his peers, in front of the teacher. I mean, like as a public announcement type situation. Like so, and he really resented that, and he resented and as anybody would. I mean, it's a. They were trying to make him feel bad. They were trying to shame him and humiliate him, and in front of the kids, and so it's something that we've had for a long time. We couldn't work on anything. We couldn't do anything. He wouldn't accept extra help or any type of accommodation, nothing, because he was so angry about that being done, and it made him feel so bad. And like the bottom line is we all need extra help. It's not sort of, we all need extra help. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses, right? We all have things that are maybe unexpected or different. And so that school actually really set us back a lot, because they just made it so difficult because he was so upset about it.
so, Arturo, I think some of the people here watching this webinar, it's, we have teachers, we have therapists, we have parents, we have a lot of different people with different backgrounds. And so if you had to give, advice to a therapist, working with little ones, adolescents, and so on, like, what would be your advice?
maybe I'd tell them like make it like maybe try to like do group activities or something.
So group activities, that's important. And what are some things that they should not do when working with people who may need extra help or support?
Well, like make it seem like really individual, like they're the only person like that sort of needs it, and no one else needs it.
Okay, so don't stigmatize.
Yeah.
And if they did have to like have these conversation, what would be your recommendation? Like if they had to have like, if a kid was like misbehaving and they had to have a conversation, like how should they have that conversation?
Maybe make it don't like have it in front of everybody, like sort of maybe have it more privately. I don't.
And
Okay.
one thing that always worked really well, that I don't even know if he remembers it, but like just positive reinforcement as a group. So when people are making good decisions or making good choices, that everybody gets a reward. And that always was the thing that worked the best for him. Any type of punishment, he like became like a rock and roll and like kid with those like, oh, you think I don't want that, like let me show you. And so it almost like caused the opposite effect. Like he saw a punishment, he's like, well, I'm gonna do it twice, then I'm gonna get you tired of it. And so the punishments never dissuaded him from doing what they didn't want him to do. It made it, he focused more in on it and he would do it more. So it was the opposite effect. So positive reinforcement, we went to one school, he's been to a lot of schools, but he went to one school where the whole school was built on positive reinforcement, just it was their natural environment. And he thrived in that school because it was just the way they did things. And so he wasn't separated. He didn't feel like picked out of the group, and just everybody had it. And what you saw was all of the kids in the entire school then had better behavior because they were all motivated to get the rewards.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, I think that's really a good things I'm taking, like positive reinforcement, make sure we were positively reinforcing group. You said it was like group activities, right? And Arturo, let me ask you a question. Did you ever wake up thinking like, I'm going to go to school today to piss off my teacher? Did you ever have that mindset going into schools?
Not walking in, no.
Awesome. That's what I think. It's so important because a lot of times teachers and educators have this misconception of, oh, this student is, raising hell, having all these behaviors, and it's like, well, they don't walk in starting their day wanting to do that. It's the environment. I think it's the environment that, a lot of times create some of these situations. And like what Melissa said, if it's a punishment driven system, like I would do whatever it is to get out of that situation as well. Is there any other last things you might want to share before I move on to asking some questions to your mom?
I mean, I don't have any questions that I can think of.
Okay, so I know people are going to want to ask you questions. So I don't know if you want to stick around, come back.
What do you want to do? Do you want to sit here while I answer some of Sunny's questions, or do you want to come back?
I mean, I don't really care.
Okay, then just.
So Melissa, it's been such a fun journey, I think. And I'm so lucky that I've been able to be a part of Arturo's life since he was little. It's been so fun seeing him grow up and seeing you be the amazing mom you are. Can you share with us the first time Arturo was diagnosed with autism and what your thoughts and feelings were at that time?
So it was actually sort of I took him to get his hearing tested when he was 18 months old, because I thought, well, maybe he has a hearing problem, and his hearing was fine. And they told me that I was just being a hyper. You're a first time mom. You're like, it's okay, calm down. Like he wasn't talking, and so I was having. And they basically just said I needed to relax. And so that's when I started. And I was, I'd mentioned it to the pediatrician. He's not talking. It can't, we're having, there's differences. I'm not sure, and I kept getting trying different things and going to different specialties. We went to a psychologist because I couldn't get him potty trained at 3. We were doing all these things, and across the board, what they would tell me, and I think it was something like 8 specialists between 18 months and 3, and every single one, 100% of them told me I just needed to relax. And so, I kept on going out, well, okay, I'm going to relax, but he's still not talking. He's not talking. So,
how old was Arturo when you noticed some of the symptoms?
Probably about 18 months. So, that's where it was. I mean, really, honestly, in hindsight, it was the whole time. He would sit there, they would call him the little professor, and he was 10 months old, because when we'd get in the car, he would just sit there and he would it wasn't like a baby. He would sit there and judge you this. And so my husband was he's like a professor in the backseat. So I mean, there were things the only way I could get him to nap from infancy was on a plane. He would look out the window at the ground going by, and he would fall asleep. And that's the only way I could easily get him to nap. He would sit in his crib and bang his head. I had to put cushions all over it. So there were things, but every time I brought it up, people were like, yeah, he's a baby, he's a boy, he's this, he's that, he's, you're just a first time mom, chill out. So at 3.5, closer to 4, I finally got him a speech and language evaluation, and we went in for it. I was pregnant with my second, and the lady was trying to get him to talk, and I remember her turning around angry at me. She was like, he's not talking. And I'm like, that is why I'm here. I don't know what to tell you. You're correct. This is my problem. I need help. But she was almost angry at me about it. She was aggressive towards me about it. And I was like, I have been asking for help for months and months, for years now. And I can't get it. So we started in speech speech at that point, and then I was able to get an OT referral. And in OT, she gave me I think she knew he had autism, and so she gave me a pamphlet on sensory processing disorder, and there was a 2-page chapter on sensory processing disorder and autism. I read it, and I was like 7 months pregnant at this, 6 months pregnant. I was very pregnant at this point, and I read that 2-page chapter. It was like 11 p.m. at night. He wasn't going to bed. Like, we had these horrific bedtime situations where it was just like I almost had a miscarriage. I was in the hospital with bleeding because like he went through a period at that time where he didn't sleep more than a half an hour at a time, and it was 6 weeks. And like I legitimately like, and my husband works crazy hours, so he was never there, and I don't have family, so it's just me. And so I ended up in the hospital, but I had this pamphlet, and and I read it, and I was like, he has autism. And I went to my husband, and I'm like, you have to, I don't know what to do, but I'm pretty sure he has autism. Read this this 2 pages of this stupid book. And he read it, and he was like, he has, and from that, because my husband's a doctor, for those of you who don't. So I'm a nurse. And my husband's like, he definitely has autism. And then he like went to the hospital the next day and like lit everybody up and was like, we're getting in, and like caused a whole bunch of ruckus. But even then it took us, he actually got diagnosed on his 4th birthday. So they called me and they said, can you be here in 20 minutes? We've had a cancellation. And I said, I will be there. And so we went in and they did the testing, and he came back as profound. And my question was like, does he know I'm his mom? And like, will he ever like understand like how much like we care about him? And the doctor was like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And so she said, at that point, she was like, your best chance is, because he's 4 and he's sort of older for a diagnosis. Like she said, you have 2 years where the brain is very malleable, and that the treatment will be very effective. And then after that, it's like, and she said, it's like a window shutting. And so you need to get as much treatment as you can in these next 2 years, and do the best you can. And on the day he was diagnosed, I was 37 weeks pregnant with Carmen.
Wow.
And so I don't really remember the like next month. I don't have a lot of memory, but we lived in rural Georgia at the time, which is not known for it's not known for anything good, quite frankly. Like nothing positive. It's known for really like bad things. And so there weren't any resources. There was no real understanding. They were very good at segregation and like, well, you're different. Like you just go right over here. And the biggest sort of advice I got was like, you need to spank him more. And like, oh, that'll teach him to talk. Let's spank him until he talks. Like, sure. And so we did everything. I mean, it was really like trying to find something in the dark. I mean, it was so overwhelming. And I knew he was a sweet little boy, and he was just like he was a little boy. And I wasn't ever going to accept like the fact like the teacher would tell me, like the teacher in 1st grade told me, they said, he's never going to read. He's never going to do math. Like, you need to quit pushing so hard. Like, you're being unrealistic. And like, that's what like my standards were too high. Like, you're asking too much. Like, this is not, a reasonable thing to ask for. And so we moved because I couldn't sleep at night and accept that at 6, at 7. And so eventually, after like some false starts, we were able to find, Santa Barbara. And then that is really where things were different for us, and like where I felt like he was treated like a kid, like he was like a human there. And And we brought him in for an evaluation, and Bob pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, he's a great kid. He's a great kid." And I was like, "Whoa," like just like sobbing in the corner, like, because, I was just so used to everybody saying, well, like, let's pull out this grid and I'm going to show you where his deficits are. And we're going to work on, this and this and this. I was so used to everybody just focusing on what we needed to work on, and nobody ever like looking at him or treating him. And it was like overwhelming for me for somebody to come and say, "Hey, he's like a really fun kid." And I was like, it changed the way I, you know, thought about it. I'm like, "You're right. He is a fun kid." Like, why are we like, this is how we need to look at him. He's a child, and this is so it really revolutionized the way we like looked at everything. We looked at our environment, how we treated him. It was not socially acceptable what we thought, but here we are. So
I know, and I think, I thank you so much for sharing that journey. And, I think the early years probably was very challenging, very dark. But we're so happy that, you were able to find that care and people that really help you guide and navigate him in the right path.
it was, let me just add, but it was only dark because there were no options outside. It was the environment, the community, the lack of resources. It didn't have to be like that. And I hope people who get diagnosis now have like a different experience, because it's not a window that closes. He's never stopped learning. He's never stopped progressing. And like the stress that I felt of like, okay, I got 2 years. Like, we have to like hit this, because then once he's 6, there's no more development. Like, who doesn't make development after 6 years? Like, every child still
Right.
develops.
What were some of the most helpful things you've like, as he was, I know Arturo, there was one summer where it was very intensive services. Like, what were some of, and he's received services throughout, and what was some of the most helpful things that you've learned through his therapy journey?
Well, I think, like I said, just the fact that, at the core, he's still a kid, and all kids are learning and growing and developing. And I would say that's the number one thing. Not the whole world doesn't have that view,
Mhm.
and I think they should. And just like the inclusion, when people know what they're doing, it works, and it makes everybody's job easier. It makes everything easier. And so people will call things inclusion that don't understand inclusion. I had an inclusion specialist one time help us, and like I was asking her about her experiences in inclusion, and she was explaining to me about, and this was in Georgia, so about how she would wrench the kid's arm behind their back and slam them and she said she has to do that every day to a kid, like I don't know, like WWE them. And I was like, that's not our inclusion. Like, that's not how we feel about inclusion. Like, that's so, just that inclusion is a whole person type therapy. And I think when it's done properly, it a rising tide raises all boats, right? It helps everybody. It helps the teacher, it helps the admin, it helps the other students, and it helps the child.
Absolutely. And how were you able to find the services? I know for some families, they're so tied to like their area. Like, what advice would you have for like parents or even therapists here to be able to get the proper services and supports for each individual child or client?
I think that's the challenge, right? Because every kid's different, and every kid, and there's a reaction like, oh, you have this diagnosis, so here's your treatment, and this is going to work for everybody, and we're going to do the same thing for everybody. And it really needs to be tailored and individual. Arturo has no intellectual disability, and everybody always wants to treat him like he has an intellectual disability. And it's because we say the word autism. And so they automatically assume like that there's, and it's not. And so I think that's the challenge of finding the right mixture of support, so where it's not too much and it's not too little, and it's the parent feels supported and the kid feels supported, and the teacher feels supported, and like that we all work together. So it's a good question, Sunny. I don't have a really good answer for it.
No, that's okay. It's a hard question. The other thing too, I know what in the past, Melissa, if someone didn't work out, like you've had no issues letting that person go. Is that something you would recommend?
Yeah, I mean, look, we had he's had we left one school because I found him locked in a closet, and we fired one girl because she shook him real hard when he was 4. We let one lady go because she took his fingers and I caught her yanking it, just crushing his little fingers, and he was like 5. And I will say, I get kids can have challenging behaviors, and he would get really excited and he would lose control. In that age, he didn't have a lot of verbal ability, and it was difficult to get that, but you can't, you can't, he's still a human being. There's still laws. If I'm not allowed to do it and I'm going to go to jail for child abuse, you're not allowed to do it in an educational setting and say it's okay. So child abuse is still child abuse. You cannot hurt a child, right? I'm not allowed to, rightfully so. You can't do it either. So I have no regret about letting any of those people go. And the only regret, I wish I could have protected him more and had better, I wish he didn't have to go through it. And I as a parent feel a lot of guilt that I couldn't prevent it.
And I think that's such a powerful message though, because oftentimes parents are like, oh, but she's the specialist, or he's the one who has a license. But if it doesn't feel right, where they're hurting your child, even if it's intentional or unintentional, I don't think that should ever be accepted.
Right.
I know you touched upon the educational system, and the educational journey has also been, it had his bumpy roads. Throughout his, educational system, if you had to start all over again, what would you do differently?
That's a great question, because all of it and none of it, right? I mean, I want him to know he is enough, right? Had he not made any progress from the day he got diagnosed, if he were nonverbal, he's enough as that. He doesn't have to achieve something or do something or make something for me to care about him and love him, and he is, and so that is enough. But at the same time, it was a real struggle to find appropriate resources. And I had an infant, and he had a very high energy. I used to strap the baby in a baby Bjorn, and I'd try to run him for 5 miles, and I couldn't do once he got that running out, once he would run 5 miles, he was then he was calm enough to be able to receive input. But it was killing me, right? I was dying because I was doing it all alone with I birthed gigantic babies. So Carmen was 30 pounds at 6 months. And so, it was it was like a sack of potato. It was just so stinking hard. I needed more help. I needed more sleep. I needed more people that understood, but I don't know how you find that in some of the places.
Yeah, it is hard. I think educational system is hard, and it's still a challenge to the state. And I think what you have been doing, advocating for Arturo's need, is so important. If you had to give advice not all parents are very aware of what full inclusion looks like. And I know for you, that's been very, very important, like making sure he's fully included. He's not in an autism program. He's not segregated. Like, what would you recommend that those families still fight for that? Would you say, like, listen to the educators?
I mean, we just have never, I mean, we only had the one school that was really it was a good fit socially, but it didn't work for him academically. It wasn't near chat, and that's why we didn't continue at that school, because he needed a higher level. He was bored, and so I think it's a very delicate balance, because with the school system, it's a relationship, right? And you're trying to build a relationship between two people, and you don't want to stress that system by asking for things that they aren't capable of, or don't know, or don't have the resources for, but you also can't accept substandard service. So, and there's a lot of substandard service that's a, and there's a, and I will say, I've never, like, maybe not at the teacher level, but I think at the higher admin level, like, some of that is expensive. And so there's a point, like, I know the one school that was our last school that we were at, they were receiving $33,000 in state funding a year for him. And I will say we were not getting a tenth of that in services. And I could not get, like, I couldn't get anything. Like, and because in one breath they would say, listen, he was in sixth grade, all sixth grade boys are dealing with this. This is a sixth grade boy thing. And then in the next breath, they'd be like, and my question was always like, well, why is he the only one getting in trouble then? Like, if all the sixth grade boys are doing this, then, like, why am I down here every day? Why are you threatening this and that? Why are we the only ones getting in trouble? Either this is a general problem that everybody's dealing with, and so he shouldn't be getting in trouble, or this is a problem just for him, and then he needs support. And so, I think that there needs to be, you need to advocate for your child's well-being and what they need to be successful within the constraints of the system. And sometimes the system needs to be pushed because, educational money is, you got to fight for it. So.
Fair enough. So there are some controversy. I'm not sure if you follow, but there have been some controversy about ABA-based therapy.
We follow.
What is your honest opinion about ABA-based therapy?
So we started out in Georgia, and so that is more of a Carbone type therapy. So so PRT is more West Coast, and then Carbone has I forget the letters. It's been so long, but we started out in that type of therapy, and it was much more rote memorization and put your hands on the table, touch your nose, show me the banana, and it's more like it was almost like dog training, I mean, so I get the anger towards it that some parents have, because it can be very punitive, and it's very, like, rigid, right? And I'm going to say this, and then you have this response, and it's this, but it's very therapist dependent. So, like, when we were going out to start PRT when he was 4, my therapist that was doing, like, the different type of ABA, she was like, you are doing him damage if you are, like, we were introducing WH questions, like, where is this, what is this, like, that type of thing. And she was like, if you start this protocol with him, if you start teaching him WH questions, you will be doing damage to him and his therapy, and he will regress. And, like, it was really, like, she, like, came in hot, and I was like, well, I don't see how teaching him to say, what is this or where is this, can harm him. So we're going to try it. I'm going to try it. And you don't have to do anything. And he took off. He took off with it. And it changed from me having to prompt him to talk to him initiating speaking. And he like, it was like a whole new world opened up for us, because he was like, what is this? Where is it? I mean, it made him able to interact with, like, it was it wasn't just a one way thing. So, you know, having said that though, you know, I don't think anybody has bad intentions. I don't think, like, maybe there are kids that are lower functioning that can benefit from that. So it's, I think the problem comes in when it's a one size fits all. Like, there can be benefits to that. I would say anything that's punitive is never going to be the ideal. But you know, and it shouldn't be used with every kid. He probably never needed it, but it was what we had in our local area, and so that's where we started.
What advice do you have for new parents navigating this journey?
That's a good question. The biggest thing is, like, find kind people, right? Like, find a community, because that's what the parent needs, and that's what the kid needs. You need nice kids that are going to be willing to be with you, and you need nice parents that you can, you know, because it's like, our life has been different. It looks different. His path has been different, and that's challenging, not because of anything, but because society makes it challenging. Like, our current system makes it challenging. It doesn't have to be, because, you know, I mean, all kids are kids, and we should just, like, say, oh, you need help handwriting? Okay, here's your help handwriting. You need help with math? Okay, here's your help with math. You need help speaking? Here's your help with speaking. Like, it should just be like, it should be more straightforward. But find your community, find your people that you can trust. And that's a harder task than, you know,
so, you know, Arturo's doing so amazing. Obviously so many strengths. Would you say, is he still receiving any type of therapy at this point?
It's not really. Because he's still like he doesn't want, he's 15, he's almost 16. And so he's at the point where, you know, I mean, there's just, and he's smart enough to understand, like, what's typical, right? And he doesn't want to be outside of that box, as any teenager does. And so we offer things and say, hey, would you be interested in doing this or taking this or trying this? And usually the answer is not really, and which is fine. So he is in, his school is Arizona State University. So they have a high school, and it is sort of a thing where the benefit of that is, like, if he does an assignment poorly, he can redo it without penalty. And so that has been, it's sort of an accommodation, right? But it's not really, because that's just how the school operates. And so all the kids get that. And so that's been incredibly helpful to us. Because if he's having a grumpy day or something, he goes, I don't want to do it, and he turns something in and he gets a poor grade, he can come back and he goes, you know,
He can do it.
I can redo it. And so, and that is, like, I just say, look, if it's a hard class, like, we'll discuss it. But like, right now he's taking biology and world history there. There's no like, the curriculum and the expectation for him is, like, when you have a 90 or above, you can move to the next thing, and, like, you know, spend time on it. And now if he really struggled with something, that is a flexible benchmark. But, most of the things he can do. In fact, we've never had it to where he hasn't been able to meet that. Like if he tried 2 or 3 times and was still struggling, we'd revisit the rule. But as of right now, he's able to do it. And so he knows he can't go forward until he gets a reasonable grade. And so he's able to modulate it himself, and he controls it. So it's not me or the teacher or somebody saying, that's not good enough. Like he manages it himself, and that's where he does the best is where, and he's very, very motivated to get things done. So like they give him his coursework and he just works down it. So he's already over halfway done with the whole entire course, and he's been in school for like 3 weeks. And so he'll finish both of these courses in the next 2-3 weeks.
Hey, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. You two are amazing. And yeah, I think those are all the questions. And this wraps it up. Thank you guys. Thank you, Melissa and Arturo, so much for spending your afternoon with us. And thank you guys for attending, and have a great rest of your day.